Hi, I'm Chad Spangler. I'm the owner, partner, one of the founders at Service Bar on U Street in Washington, D.C., and Causa and Amazonia in Blagden Alley.
Yeah, I mean, you have really come a long way. I was saying this to you before we started, you and I have run in these like weird parallels for like a period of time now, to the point where it was almost unacceptable that we actually really first met each other at like a 6 a.m. workout class, which isn't even a real thing. You've been friends with a lot of people that I have kept very close to me for a very long time. The food and beverage industry in DC is this big. It's like so small. And so I'm really excited to sit down and actually like talk with you in this capacity
Yeah, me too.
today. I think when people will hear this that are local, they'll immediately start to be like, oh, I know all those places that you just mentioned and had no clue that you were directly tied to them. So maybe we can start by getting to understand how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I mean, in food and beverage, I really started when I was in high school, and I like minimum wage was 5.75 then. So I worked at this place called Leahy Family Fun Park, and it was a fun job, but you would make no money at
Yeah.
all. And so I started working at a country club near my house, and you can make tips. So I would make so much more there. So it was just a better job in high school. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I ended up getting into it. And I thought that would be it. And when I got back into college, I went to GW, and it's very expensive to live in the city. And I couldn't afford to have an unpaid internship. So I ended up getting a job as Glendon, who's now my partner. I was his bar back at Founding Farmers. And it was like right when they opened in their heyday. And I just kind of flourished in the company and stayed for 5 years. And I studied finance. I used to have a job at Morgan Stanley, and I kind of had a successful start to a bartending career and had won some competitions and gotten some recognition. And so when we graduated, I kind of told my bosses, like, hey, if I give this restaurant thing a shot for a year, will you still have a job for me when I come back?
Sure.
They said, yeah, of course, anytime, go do your thing, whatever. And so I did. And not like I haven't ever looked back, but I never went back or left the industry since then. So that's really kind of how it all started.
That's insane. That story is like, that is not what I was expecting. I 100% expected there to be like some country club that you worked at or, some bar back moment. Cause I feel like that's just like a very normal thing, kind of like gets people that taste behind the bar, which is like a very intimidating space. I think for me personally, I worked in the food and beverage industry for like 8 years, like serving tables. And I always was like, oh, do I do the bar thing? Do I not do the bar thing? And opted not to. Felt like I was better just working a room and like, flirting for tips, whatever. But I mean, to kind of hear you go through this whole process of, deciding to proactively step away from a finance, which is like very like cozy-ish, to decide to take a risk in the food and beverage industry and open up a restaurant. I mean, that's scary. What were your feelings? Were you just pure excitement or was there any type of like hesitation?
I think I realized that I hated finance by then. So I was just every day I would wake up to go to work, and I would try and think of an excuse that I didn't have to go if I
Yeah.
was sick or if I had some school project coming up that I was still busy with or whatever. And so I just loved the restaurants. And so
Yeah.
it was more like follow your heart and not your head. And ironically enough, I think it's been a really fun thing to look back on. When you kind of come to these decisions about should we do this or should we do that, because financially there's things that maybe you could do that you don't have your passion behind. And I
Right.
often get to look at like if I only cared about money, I'd still be working in finance. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of a nice like anchoring spot to go back and look at to say, no, you do this and you make decisions in this life and in your professional career because you do love it.
Hmm.
It's not like I love every part of my job, but it becomes kind of a guiding light when you're looking at whether you should take on a new project or whether
Right.
you should take something in this one direction or maybe do something that you don't feel kind of 100% behind.
Sure.
I'm like very much a person that uh I can't really hide my emotion oftentimes. And so I have a really hard time doing things that I just hate doing.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of it. It was really just following that. So I don't know if there was excitement. There's definitely a bit of like nervousness. I
Yeah.
remember when I graduated school, one of like my friend's dads came up to me and said that the speaker in their graduation had caught on the mic and said, and every parent's worst fear, your child tells you they're going to be a bartender after college. And
You're like,
like our whole group of friends started laughing and said literally what I was
that's
doing.
what you were doing. Amazing. I don't want to like skate over the fact that you worked at Founding Farmers, which is a massive company, here in the DC area. It's like a place that is constantly busy. So you had a very good, I think, exposure to a busy environment. You obviously ended up stepping into a space where you open up your own space. Where was the timeline for that? Was that like immediate? You say, hey, here's all my money. I'm gonna jump into the opening up service bar, or was there any other endeavors that you jumped into before?
There has never been a moment in my life that I had any money to say, hey, here's all my money. So that never happened. But no, so this was like 2009 is when I started at Founding Farmers. I was in the Pennsylvania Avenue location. I graduated in 2011. And so it was 2011, 2012. We opened the Potomac Founding Farmers. Then we came and we opened the Georgetown
Right.
location when it reopened. And at that point, I had kind of thought I'd learned as much as I was going to learn from the company. And I quit. I went on a staging tour. So I just like worked for free in a few places. So I went
Okay.
to LA. I worked with this dude, Devin Espinosa at Porvu and La Descarga. I went to San Francisco with an old friend and I staged at La Coqueta on the Embarcadero. And then I had won the DC Bombay Sapphire Most Imaginative
Yes.
bartender competition. So the finals were in Vegas. So I flew to Vegas. And for some reason, I thought I was going to have like a suite. And so I invited a bunch of friends to come. We had just a regular, like 1-bedroom hotel room. We got to give it 2 beds, but 4 of my friends came. So it was 5 of us staying in this room.
Yeah.
And it was probably not the best environment to do a competition in. And then after that, I went and I staged at the Aviary in Chicago. And
Okay.
then I had like $2 left in my bank account and came back. And I was, I had been introduced to a consulting chef at Farmers that was supposed to be this like amazing guy. He was an Iron Chef and, highly touted. And he asked me if I wanted to open a restaurant in Brazil for the World Cup.
Oh my
Like, yeah,
gosh.
I was thinking I was 22 or 23. I thought it was the sickest opportunity. And so we started a consulting group together and it just kind of all ended up being bullshit and lies and embarked on like the worst 9 months of my life. But we kind of took over this like failing restaurant. I was supposed to be just doing beverages and I ended up having to be the only manager of this like failing place. Like I'd never worked a host in before.
Right.
But I was GM and I think like adversity always breeds character. So I ended up learning a lot. And I think that gave me a lot of the like sets of skills you would need to kind of be an owner, if you will.
Yeah.
But then I left that, came back. I worked with like Ari and Micah when they opened Chaplin's. I was
Yeah.
just bartending there. And then I actually worked at Barcode on Sundays at like this nightclub. And Glendon and I started doing consulting together. And
Okay.
so him and I consulted for like 15 to 20 restaurants maybe. And that was always a means to an end for me of getting the experience and learning without having to kind of like put everything on the line for yourself.
Sure.
Seeing how other people ran organizations and taking what you could. So that all occurred kind of from like 2014, 15 into 2016. And then that's when we got the opportunity to open Service Bar. Someone just said, hey, are you guys ready? There's this spot on U Street. It's kind of turnkey. It's never had a liquor license. And we were just too naive to know how challenging it would be. And we're like, yeah, let's do it. And pieced together like a small amount of financing and
Sure.
opened it. And yeah, it's been really awesome and rewarding ever since.
I feel like we need to pause. I mean, that's like 5 years essentially that go by. And then you kind of get to this place where you finally are like doing your own thing after the tour that you just went on, which is like insane. And also something that would have scared the crap out of a lot of people. Like a lot of people would not have said yes to as many things as you said yes to, which I think is something you almost need in this industry, is that like capacity to say yes. Before we go any further, I'm really curious if you think back at like the littlest version of yourself where you're considering what you want to do when you grow up. What did you want to be?
I think like a lot of little kids growing up, I think I had initially wanted to be a doctor.
A lot of little kids.
Yeah, and so it was kind of that. And then I remember being really unsure for a long time.
Okay.
Especially when I was leaving high school and I was like really good at math and physics and things like that, but I just didn't think I wanted to be an engineer. I don't think I knew what an engineer was.
Yeah.
And there's so many other kind of career paths that I think I just didn't really understand what they were. So when I got to college, I was like, I'll just do business because business kind of fits all of these things. And I think that I want to own my own company at some point or kind of get on that track. So it was always kind of business, and then finance was something I was pretty good at, like studies wise. So that's kind of the track I went. It definitely never was that I wanted to own or be in restaurants when I was growing up or being a little kid.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had this one like career that I would pin on my wall. I was like, definitely going to do this.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, it's like an interesting thing though, because even as I'm sitting and hearing you say this, like, oh, doctor, but like you move into business in such like this is just practical, this is the right thing to do. And it's probably been so applicable to you as you've gone through this journey that you've been on. I mean, obviously you have this capacity just like to take risks and say yes to a bunch of things, which assuming is tied back to you just feeling very like passionate about the space. But then also there's a lot of like groundwork that you set up for yourself so that you could take on this like next journey, which 2016 you go to open up Service Bar. Mm-hmm. Which for folks that don't know, this is a space that I've been many times. I'm sure there's a photo somewhere and I'm not actively sure where it is at this point, but I was going through teacher training right around the same time Service Bars open and so forth. And I have distinct memories, and you probably would not appreciate this, maybe you would, of doing a chin stand on the floor of Service Bar, like middle of the night, like totally inappropriate probably for my chin to have been on the floor of a bar. But
if you're okay with it, I'm definitely okay
but that's the kind of place Service Bar was, right? It immediately like took on this like community like space, right? Like it just is some place that welcomed a lot of folks in, a lot of creativity behind the bar. Obviously we can talk about like how this whole thing came to mind, but the drinks were delicious. They were different. They were strong. The atmosphere was welcoming. It had like good vibes all the time. And it's kind of continued to evolve and change like over a period of time. And I don't know, something about it made me feel like I could do a chin stand on the floor there. So maybe we should just talk about how you all conceptualize Service Bar.
I think if you feel that comfortable in the space, then we're doing our job. That's literally what it is. Our mission statement there is to be a neighborhood bar first and a cocktail bar second. And so it's creating that comfortable environment and making people feel welcome and forgetting about the fact that like, yeah, we make good drinks and we serve good food, but it's not really... It's not really about that, right? People go out all the time, and it's not because you're getting this like top tier and top notch food and beverage. Yeah, that's great. But, we talk about there's like 14 wins or losses that someone can have before a food item or a drink even hits the table, right? If you walk up to the door and there's like fingerprints and smudges on it and it's dirty, and you look at it, that's going to kind of put you off.
Right.
If our website's not functioning or our Instagram's not up and you tried to find our location and you were frustrated because you couldn't, that's kind of a loss right there. If we're rude to you at the front, that could be a loss. A lot of times people are coming in, you're getting greeted, you're reading a menu, you're ordering. Sometimes you're paying ahead of time before that
you can get your product
thing even hits in front of you. So sure, is it important that it's great once you get it? It is, but there's so many times and so many opportunities for us to win before you even get to touch that. And that's what it's like really about at the end of the day. We so in 2016, when you rewind the clocks, it was not the very beginning of the craft cocktail movement, but in DC at least, and nothing against these places, there's time and a place for every experience. To get a good cocktail, it was like a really formal, really quiet situation.
Yes.
Drinks took like 25 minutes. And we were all restaurant people. So we'd get off of restaurants and most cocktail bars were closed. And you're not going to like finish a 12-hour shift looking to go get drunk with your friends and go sit down at a quiet cocktail bar.
Right.
So we wanted to kind of flip the script and show that the cocktail bar doesn't need to be this only stiff, informal environment. And so we wanted to create kind of like, why do we love going to Irish pubs and take the elements of that and break it down and make a cocktail bar kind of in that same mentality. And
right.
Service Bar is by no means an Irish pub. I don't mean it like
by
that.
no means.
But taking like that feeling of comfortability and the aspects of it that you really like, making things accessible in terms of a price point.
Yes.
Because we don't need, like, sure, Service Bar has $23 cocktails. Like, they're expensive, but we also have $9 drinks and we have $11 drinks and we still have $12 drinks, which you don't see in a lot of cocktail bars these days. It's like the price point has now risen to $17, it seems.
It's insane. Yeah.
When we opened, we had our all day $7 menu, and that lasted until the pandemic. And then after the pandemic, our staff was like, dude, can we please stop making daiquiris for $7? This is just like so tiresome. So we raised that a little bit.
Yeah. I think the other thing that you all did was you introduced a way for it to not just be a daytime spot, but also like a nighttime spot, but also a place where you could actually get really good fried chicken.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, culinary wise, it's also like a culinary stop in some capacity on U Street. I mean, there's a lot to offer on that beautiful street, and it's evolved and changed a lot. One of the things that's remained consistent is what you all bring to the table. What has that experience been like for you all to kind of see the neighborhood, like people coming in and out, and you all kind of staying the same, new buildings going up? I mean, it's like there's a lot happening. And you touched on the pandemic too. I'm sure there's been a lot for you all to consider.
Yeah. I mean, the city changes, right? I think that's just kind of a part of it. I'm sure that change was accelerated a lot because of the pandemic. In terms of things, we're usually welcome to the change and welcome to seeing new things. I think things have settled down a little bit, but crime started to really get a bit scary on the street for a while. So that was something that was a concern and something a bit out of control, out of your hands. So that was like the one big change, I think, that kind of piqued our, like, what are we going to do? What do we need to consider? How do we combat this? And luckily, since then, it's kind of calmed down. And we actually have a really great relationship with usually like MPD that patrols the area.
Sure.
So we're usually able to kind of like get in touch with them to make our staff feel safe. And we have security every day now. So that's been really cool. But yeah, seeing all of the people and places that change up and down the street can be frightening. So you do see a lot of places close. And luckily, we've been able to stay consistent, stay busy. So I'm just really proud and happy of like our team and our clientele and just DC as a really supportive community. And ever since the pandemic, obviously, we've gotten some pretty renowned like recognitions, and that's helped the consistency of business a lot, which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, should we talk about the fact that you just were rated like one of the best like bars in the States?
Thanks. Yeah.
Talk about that. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
proud. I don't know what it was. I think I was like, oh, yeah, I've been there a bunch of times. I also know the people.
Yeah, it was cool. We kind of coming out of the pandemic, we'd set what our targets and what our goals were. And so we said the best thing we could ever achieve as a bar would be to get on the world's 50 best list, because North America didn't have one yet.
Right.
And then it wasn't even a few months later, we got an email saying that we were accepted into the inaugural North America's 50 best list, which was just so phenomenal. And so that was in 2022. We got ranked 18 out of 50. Which was crazy. And then last year we were 33, which was still really magnificent, because now all these places have, it's like you have a target on your back, but more so all these other places are now starting to try and get that attention.
Yeah.
So it's even cooler that you're still in this field with all these people kind of chasing after it. And then this year we got 22 again for 2024. So that to me is just even more incredible, because now it's even a greater like presence in the whole community, and we went up in rank again.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, super, super proud of the team that we have. They kill it every day. I'm always so happy and proud to like walk into Service Bar and just watch the team do their thing. It's like definitely something that gives me a huge, huge sense of pride.
I love that. And you've also received some other accolades this year with your other endeavors. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you decided to branch off and like go from Service Bar to where we are today, which is, I mean, I was shocked when I realized that the two were connected.
Yeah.
I mean, you leaned heavy into creating a space, a culinary experience. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So once Service Bar, like the wheels were turning, we just had so many commercial real estate agents like pounding down our door to show us new locations.
Sure,
and
you've got capital.
Yeah, then you just cave and whatever, let's go see them. So we started looking at spots, and if you rewind the clock even further, back when Glendon and I were in consulting days,
Yeah.
it wasn't one of my projects. It was one of Glendon's. He got hired to do the beverage program at a Peruvian restaurant on H Street called Ocopa. It's in the building where Stable is now, like
Yep.
the raclette cheese place. And so he goes to do this Peruvian restaurant. He's talking about it, and Carlos Delgado is the chef. So I had known Carlos socially a little bit, and this was the first time that we all kind of got together in a professional sense. We're introduced to Peruvian food, was blown away. Was blown away with Carlos's cooking, his work ethic, his inherent and incredible talent. Glendon got the itch for pisco and just kind of dove in, but we were all young at that point, and over the years it became this like, we should do something, until it became more and more serious. And Glendon and I ended up going and seeing this building in Blagden Alley, and we just looked at each other like, this is the spot. This is the Peruvian restaurant to do with Carlos.
Right.
We called Carlos that day, said, hey, do you want to come see it? He came, saw it the next day, and we immediately started lease negotiation. And it's funny, like, I was having a conversation with one of our younger guys talking about how we got started. And I'm like, if you knew how challenging it would really be, you would
Right.
never do it. You would never take the leap. Like, you would never take that risk. But it's like that naivety that allows you to do those things.
Sure.
And then the challenges come, and you just kind of tackle them head on and figure them out one step at a time. But like, by no means was there a need for like two bartenders who have one little tiny spot on U Street to think that they could take a cold dark shell. Like, it was gravel on the ground. Like, we had to pour concrete slab. There was no MEP. It was just walls, windows, and like the second floor was literally like plywood that you had to walk across like a catwalk.
Yeah.
And so we had to figure out how to build that from the ground up with all permitting, and we had no idea what we were doing. And like, I didn't even know what an architect really did. I'm not gonna lie. So we just had no understanding of this like monumental task we were undertaking. But
Sure.
it was crazy too. We were supposed to have half of our financing come from a bank, and 3 days before our closing, because of COVID, they pulled out. So
I remember hearing about this.
Yeah, we had like $1 million in cash raised, and we had burned through almost all of it, and we were in the middle of construction. We lost like this $1.5 million loan from a bank, and it's April 2020. And
Right.
so not exactly the most friendly environment to raise funds for a restaurant.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we ended up figuring it out and changing a million things about the project. And
Yeah.
I got my master's in finance in that year or so. And the restaurant itself is really, it's Carlos's vision. And I mean, the reason I'm passionate about it is, like, when I went to Peru the first time to check out the food and beverage scene, I had this like egocentric conception of what Peruvian food was. Here, a lot of it's mom and pop restaurants. Obviously, there's Pollo a la Brasas.
Yeah.
But when I went to Peru, like, the restaurants were on fire, from the design of the restaurants, the graphic design they would do, the uniforms, the plateware, the glassware, the plating, the presentation, the service. Any one of the top restaurants in Lima you could put in DC, New York, LA, and they would rock. It blew my mind how serious the restaurant scene was there, and how diverse all of the different offerings were. And so for me, I think the purpose of the restaurant is really teaching people about what Peruvian food really is, and helping to tell that story. Our mission statement there is to be ambassadors of Peruvian cuisine and culture.
Right.
And so that's really like what that restaurant means to me. But it's Carlos's restaurant through and through. Glendon does an absolutely amazing bar program. He is obsessed with Pisco. Glendon's license plate says Pisco now. And he's like the biggest nerd. I mean, I
Very
love him,
into
but
it.
he is so into it. And so we have the largest Pisco collection outside of Peru that we know of. And we wanted to be able to showcase Peruvian food kind of in two different ways. And the way the restaurant's designed is that Carlos is the first floor. It's 22-seat tasting menu only. It represents food mostly from the coast and Andes, but our menus change. And as the menu changes, the goal of it is to kind of tell the story geographically of the food in Peru. So like right now we have food that's more representative of one particular region. Our next menu that's coming out is Nikkei, which is Japanese Peruvian. It's not fusion, but it's the easier way to understand it. It's kind of those two cuisines together. So it's going to kind of tell that story. and it focuses a little bit more on seafood and things. The upstairs restaurant is a little bit more accessible, it's lower price point, and we are able to showcase Amazonian cuisine, which is very rarely seen outside the Amazon rainforest. Like even if you're in Lima, a lot of people have never had jungle food, as we call it. So that was kind of the goal, is we get to represent two very different approaches to Peruvian cuisine and hopefully showcase it in a manner that is not seen really in DC.
Yes.
And changes people's perception about what Peruvian food is and what Peruvian food can be.
I definitely think you've exposed people to a different like angle for sure. And you've also created another environment there that I think is fun. And it's destination-ish. Like it feels like a destination, very similar to Service Bar on U Street for a really long time. Very different experiences, obviously, but very impressive. And I remember that being extremely challenging, like to get the doors open because it was just the wrong time. Like everything happens for a reason though. So hopefully at the end, you know, the result was exactly what you were hoping it to be. We've talked a lot about like challenges that you've overcome and doing so in partnership and so forth with your peers. I'm curious if you can reflect back on like an aha moment where you like absolutely knew that you had made the right choice to step away from finance and step into the food and beverage space.
You know, it's funny because there is a very aha moment. So I told you about the first consulting group I started, and it was the worst 9 months of my life. And this phrase, I think it was Confucius that said it actually, that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Right.
And I like really, really felt that after leaving this, and I was like, I'm done with it. I'm done with restaurants. I'm not going to do them anymore. So my friend got me an interview with his company in New York, and I went. It's like the interview was on Wednesday at like 3:00. So I got in Tuesday night, maybe 8. And so none of my friends were out because they all had normal like work the next day. So I went out by myself and I went to employees only. And
love that place.
Yeah, it's super fun, and it's, you know, kind of like was this hallmark of what a fun cocktail bar can be. I mean, it still is, but at the time when I walked in, I was there and I hadn't even ordered a drink yet. I was like 2 to 3 minutes. I'm looking around and I just realized that if I were to do anything else in my career, all I would ever do with my free time was try and do this and try and create this and try and make this my hobby until it would just drive me crazy. And so 5 minutes standing in there, I realized there's no point for me to go to this interview tomorrow. I'm just going to stay in restaurants for the rest of my life. And I've literally never looked back. I think like I made my peace with the chaos and the craziness of the life right then. And I went to the interview the next day and they invited me back and I politely declined and said, you know, thanks guys, but this isn't right for me. So that was my moment.
It makes those moments where there was only $15 in your account, or like those stressful times, you know, while you're also trying to do your whole lifing, like it makes all of that like a lot more rewarding, a lot more worth it. I mean, to your point, like adversity does breed this opportunity for success. You guys definitely went through it for sure. If you were to think about the thing that drives you, gets you out of bed every day, and you had to deduce it down to one word, what would it be?
Yes, this was the hardest question that I knew you were going to ask, because I think it is difficult to put it all into one word. But when I boil it down, I think it comes down to respect.
Ooh.
And it's not just respect for others, but it's respect for yourself. I think that you're going to have wins and losses every day, whether they are small or large. And you're going to have a ton of failures and you're going to make a ton of mistakes. I mean, I mess up all the time. And hopefully I always own up to those mistakes. But I think when you can kind of look yourself in the mirror the next day and still have self-respect and still be really proud of what you did the previous day or what you did the previous week, or if you look back a month or a year, if you're really proud of the work that you've put in and you feel like you have done what you can, again, to be respectful of those others around you and make sure that you're supporting your teammates in the way that they deserve to be, and that you're respecting the business, you're respecting your customers. That to me is like what gets me to go the next day. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't think I was working as hard as I could, or I didn't think I was striking a relatively decent balance between work and life.
Sure.
And so, you know, if you want to take a week off, That's fine. Do it, but make sure you get your stuff taken care of first. And if you want to enjoy and reap the rewards of all the hard work that you've done, I guess enjoy the fruits of your labor. It's like, that's great. And you should be allowed to do that. But you can only do it if you really respect everything that you've put into it, kind of since day one, and you enjoy the way that you've worked around other people. So I think respect is the word.
It's the first time someone's ever used that word. I love the way that you explained it, because it's not just respect for yourself, but respect for the work that you do. I also think that one thing that you've said, and you've kind of brought this theme up a few times, is like there's a level of respect you have for your team too. You've been really thoughtful about the people that you've kept around you. There's some of the same people that were there from the moment you guys opened the doors at Service Bar are still there, which is part of the reason I
We have
love it.
3 people have been there for almost 7 years.
That's
and
amazing.
that is so special to me. Alcides, Herman, and my main girl, Christine Kim.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome, and it's so fun to work with them. We do. I mean, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you if it wasn't for the team that surrounds me. I mean, Glendon and I, is like, he was my first husband, really. We've worked together for so long that we have just been through it all. And
Yeah.
so he is my family in every sense of the word. And he puts in a lot of hard work, and he's overcome some crazy challenges in his own right and regard.
Yeah.
And so working with him is awesome. Obviously with Calcin Amazonia, working with Carlos is truly incredible. I mean, he's such a talented chef, and he has this like vision and direction and his own drive of what he wants to do. And so I'm just trying to support him half the time.
Sure.
But yeah, we have an amazing team at Service Bar. We've got an amazing team at Calcin Amazonia. And so like I said, I would not be here having these conversations about the success of what we've done
Yep.
if it weren't for them. I mean, you asked me before, do I work service in the restaurants anymore? I don't. I mean, I enjoy doing it, but I have so much else on my plate that
Yeah.
I don't get done a lot of those other things if I'm there all the time at night. And so,
Right.
I have to put it in their hands to get it done, and hopefully guide them and talk with them and coach them and give them training and tools and resources that they need to accomplish the task. But yeah, no, absolutely. The team is what makes us successful.
You have experienced a lot in a very short amount of time, and you've said yes to a lot of experiences along the way. I'm curious, if somebody were to ask you for some piece of advice, what is like one piece of advice that you'd give somebody either in this space or outside of it?
Don't be afraid to fail. Like, failures are how you learn, and making mistakes is something, like I said, I do it on a daily basis. Like, I mess everything up all the time. And so I think, if you keep failing at the same thing, you're not learning that lesson. That's not necessarily good, but I think you just have to make decisions. You're never going to have all of the information you need to make the most informed decision you possibly could. It's just not realistic, right? And we don't have time to think about every single thing for like 3 days and debate it at a round table. Sometimes you just have to make the call with the information that you have at hand. And if you make the wrong call, adapt to it, figure it out, learn from it, have the discussion afterwards, give the feedback to the team, allow those around you to fail too, empower the people that surround you, and then just like, it's not a big deal if they mess up. I just tell everyone, just be a nice person. Like, that's all hospitality is. Just be nice to people.
Right.
And like, you're going to be 90% of the way. If you ever do anything that is just to be nice to someone that's coming into one of our restaurants, it's fine. Whatever. We'll learn from it. If you make a mistake, it's not a big deal. We'll talk about it. We'll figure it out for next time. Don't make the same mistake twice.
Right.
And we'll go from there. So yeah, just like, don't be afraid to fail, or don't be afraid to make decisions that you're just not so sure of, as long as
Right.
you can then look back on them and learn and take that lesson from it.
That's a great piece of advice. Before I let you go, I am curious, is there anything else you guys are working on? Did you think this question was going to come, and were you hoping that I wouldn't?
No, you're welcome to. So we actually just we were looking at a space in Union Market to expand the Calcin Amazonia brand, and we didn't come to terms. So that's like kind of started for the bug to start scratching again, to kind of like branch out into the next venture. Glendon and I looked at a space in Philly for another service bar and decided we need to have at least another place in DC first so we can kind of have a regional team. So there's a number of things that are kind of cooking, but nothing that's absolutely solid at this point. Like I said, opening Causa in Amazonia was like paralyzing for a little while. So it got to a point where we had these like 5-year plans of how everything was going to expand, and we just had to cut it all off and put blinders on and just get the job done. So that was life for a while, and it's only been until maybe the last 4 or 5 months that we've taken the blinders off and said, okay, things are going well.
Sure.
Financially, the companies are looking good, and we can start exploring what that next opportunity is. I will say that I don't think we're going to open another service bar in DC, but opening more Causa and Amazonia brands or branches of, or something in that family, will likely be the next step. It kind of depends on the way. Like I have an idea about doing like Causa Cafe. That would kind of be a more high-end coffee shop that does a lot of like a huge juicing program as well that offers Peruvian food more in like the style of lunch. We have an idea we were going to open more like a criollo is the basis of Peruvian food. So it's kind of what you would be first introduced to. And we want to do a criollo restaurant next. That's kind of it's like the building block to where you would end up getting to Causa and Amazonia's food.
Yeah.
So that's what we were looking at doing. So I think that idea is in the loop right now. And then we'll see. I also, as I've been thinking about my future a lot, I've realized that like I love working with Glenn. I love working with Carla. It's just saying about that. But at some point, eventually, I will want to do something that's like my own concept. And so I don't know where that's going to kind of fall in line, but I'm sure that'll be something at some point down the road.
Perfect.
We have the opportunity to open like Causa as a Pizzeria as well, which was another idea we had before we ended up opening the 2 restaurants. So there's a lot of things that are cooking. We'll see where the iron strikes first.
All right. Perfect. So if people want to learn more about the concepts that you've talked about, or if they want to learn more about you or connect with you, what is the best way for them to get in contact?
So come to the restaurants and see for yourself. Hopefully you will learn a lot about them by just coming in and dining there and seeing. To learn more about me, listen to this podcast and you'll probably have a nice little insight into it. I don't know. I don't have like a personal website, and I'm not great at social media. So
you're really the guy behind the curtain a little bit.
Yeah, I'm good at sharing things. But that's about it.
Okay.
If you wanted to learn more about me, I would say tune into Driven By Karen Plummer, and just come by the restaurants and see what it is for yourself. Learn about them there. Obviously, if you go on to servicebardc.com, causadc.com, you can kind of see some of our offerings. There's like a little about us page in each one of them. I've had a number of like publications write some things, so I'm sure if you Googled Chad Spangler bartender DC, you'd find some articles to learn a little bit more as well.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm super, super thankful that you spent your time with me today. Thank you so much. Thank you for creating the spaces that you've created along with your colleagues. I think DC is so unique in the way that we have so many different concepts that kind of like come and go. And so the ones that stay put and the ones that like are consistent really do mean a lot. And so I'm really grateful. I've had so many amazing experiences at Service Bar, some that I don't remember, some that I remember very, very thoroughly. And I've enjoyed quite a few meals as well. So thank you very much for everything that you've done. And I'm excited to see where it goes.
Well, thanks. It's my pleasure to spend the morning with you. And thank you very much for having me. It's an honor. And I'm glad that we finally got to spend some time together outside of 6 a.m. Cut 7 classes.
Absolutely.
But no, it's an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.